Okay, delighted that we have two real experts here on ICO. For those of you who've been around the FinTech Sydney Meetups before, Tim Lee, spoken before, author of Down the Rabbit Hole, which is a really, really fascinating read about the blockchain space. Also delighted that we have Peter Reeves, partner of Gilbert and Tobin. Okay, we're going to kick off with some real basic stuff just to get us up to a certain level. I'm going to ask Tim and then Peter the same question. What is an ICO and why is there just so much money coming into this space?
Okay, what is an ICO? First of all, I hate the word ICO. I think it implies it's too much of a security. Basically, it's crowdfunding on steroids is the best way of saying it. So if you think of a very traditional type of crowdfunding structure, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but a brand new bottle, for example, people would normally donate or they put a pre-order in for the actual bottle and then you get the goods 6, 9, 12 months down the line. With a token sale, it's very much the blockchain platform that's being designed. There is a token that powers that platform, and that's what's being made available in terms of the token sale. There is a twist to it, of course, that the tokens themselves, the cryptocurrency tokens like Ethereum, I mean, how many people have heard of Ethereum? Okay, yeah, okay, that explains why a lot of you are here, I think. Yeah, so the token is actually made available to exchange on the cryptocurrency exchanges around the world, and there are about 45 globally. So a token sale is very much crowdfunding on steroids, where there is the opportunity to actually ultimately have the ability to either buy the tokens to actually, if you're going to use the platform, or potentially sell it if for whatever motivation that you guys might have. So that's what an ICO is, in my view.
And just a quick follow-up question, it's crowdfunding on steroids because no one's really regulating it, so
yes.
You don't have to jump through the normal hoops of the usual IPO, documentation, all that sort of stuff. What's your sort of comment on the fact, when you say on steroids, is it because it's easy to get into, you write a white paper and you're there?
It's really that it is a lot less complex than IPOs, but that said, I mean, we've been working on this token sale for hours, for 6 months full time. And we've been working on the technology and the project for 18 months. So it's not something that is light. But because the community within the blockchain space globally understands the tech, and you with Bitcoin and Ethereum having gone up to stupid high levels, a lot of people have bought in at an earlier level, so they understand the technology and they understand the risks. So they can get behind projects a lot quicker and a lot easier than with traditional IPOs. But just in terms of statistics, there was a report came out just the other day, $1.2 billion has been raised by token sales this year alone. And if you think that the VC space as a whole, in terms of their external investments, have actually, since 2011, have put in 1.5 billion. That gives you an idea of where it puts it into perspective.
Okay, thank you for that. Peter, your view, and obviously legal perspective,
yep.
Your view on ICOs?
I think the first thing I'd say is crowdfunding on steroids. I think it's more about the fact that there's this borderless nature of the builds going on in the fundraising exercise. It's actually happening. And I don't think that's a question that you, or an aspect that you look at irrespective of what the regulatory outcomes are. So from my point of view, when I think about ICOs, I'm thinking about fundraising. It is in fact a fundraising exercise, and we're looking at it from a couple of perspectives. We're looking at it obviously from the classic fundraising securities sort of exercise, what's regulated, what's not, what are your jurisdictional issues, and also staying out of those jurisdictional issues. So speaking to what Tim was addressing, what are you actually creating? So there's a perspective of the builders and there's a perspective of the regulators. And when you look at what you're creating, that sort of economy, that environment, that is where you use the tokens, where they derive their intrinsic value, that system that has value, that actually imparts value to the tokens themselves. And looking and thinking about what those two things are, striking a balance and trying to understand whether or not you regulate and you can actually do it, and whether or not it is something that is going to sort of raise, eyes from a regulatory point of view, and be open to various jurisdictions, or you've got challenges in other jurisdictions. So primarily it is a fundraising exercise for a kind of a new kind of business, not for an organisation, not for operational capital, but to create a digital economy, to create a set of services, to create some sort of digital environment where you can use those tokens to actually participate, prepay for services, or buy proprietary money. That's creating proprietary money. You get in there early, or you buy in later, or you come in later once the environment's created. So it's, to me, thinking about fundraising, but not from the perspective of normal operational capital or funds, but from a new market, a new environment, a new economy that's being built.
Okay, follow-up question on that then. The entity that does the ICO, can you talk about, do they get all the money, and what are their responsibilities, and where are they based? All those sorts of questions.
It's always an interesting question, apart from what am I actually making, what is the token itself. You have an entity that has to actually conduct this. You have to have an entity that does something, that creates or starts the process and says, I'm going to create this environment, I have this idea, we have this idea, we're going to operate together to actually engage with folks, builders, technology people, to actually build this environment and figure out what the economics are of the environment that you actually want to build as well. So there's a lot of analysis that goes in there. That entity has to actually undertake that exercise, or will be taken to have undertaken that exercise from the jurisdiction where it is. So if you're thinking about where a lot of ICOs are happening at the moment, we're looking at Singapore, and you're not really seeing any happen in Australia. There's a lot of that activity coming out of Singapore because it's seen, I guess, as a friendly jurisdiction in relation to the understanding around what ICOs are and what the intentions are. And that entity then actually undertakes this process, raises funds by effectively pre-selling these tokens, and then uses that money to build the environment, to build the market, to build the economy that we're talking about, that the tokens will be used in.
Okay, thank you for that. Nice segue into Veredictum. Do you want to tell us a bit about your vision and what's involved with creating a new market?
Okay, I mean, Veredictum is a decentralized anti-piracy and distribution platform for the film and TV industry. We're trying to reduce film and TV piracy by 80% over 10 years. And we're trying to bring together the whole creative community to help solve the problem that is completely affecting the whole of that creative community. And to do so, I don't know, how many people have heard of SETI, based out of Berkeley University? Anybody heard of SETI? Okay, a few. SETI is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and what they do, they beam signals out into outer space, they then get that detail back, they then decentralize the processing of that data. So they've got 3 million people around the world that process all that data. And the idea is, one aspect of what we're doing is actually the SETI for pirated content. So we're bringing the creative community together to help us find pirated content. And then we flip those guys on the head, because there's an anti-piracy advocacy there, and those guys then become white hat peer-to-peer distribution. And then that's all wrapped around a marketplace that brings content producers through to key market influencers. So the market influencers can actually bring their audiences together to bid for a price of content that's what the market actually wants. Because the biggest problem, we're trying to hit the drivers of piracy, which are really about where people can't get access to content when they want, how they want, at a price point that's fair, and where there aren't enough deterrents. So that's the mixture that we're trying to bring together.
And tell us a bit about the white paper that you've written for your upcoming ICO.
Well, the technical white paper has been written by Sam here, who's our CTO, and I have to say, it's a great read if you're an insomniac. But if you're, if you're a technical person, it's really fascinating. As a business person, it's hard to read through a lot of the deep technical papers. I mean, they are very valuable, and I would say that it's important to actually get to grips with it. We have done a graphical overview of the technical white paper and an introductory white paper. The full technical white paper will be out next Monday, the 24th, which is when the core data, the core information will be revealed for the token sale. But it's a very in-depth document, because the majority of early stage funders for token sales and that type of area are very blockchain friendly, and they understand the space, and they're very technical. They will fully appreciate what's in there. And the power of it is that you actually get feedback from the community. So the community then says, yes, we like this. How can can we shift this? Can you look at this? Are there different ways of actually improving it? And so with the technical paper and the technology we're building, it's going to add to the whole ecosystem of the blockchain ecosystem worldwide.
Now, usually when you are a company and you create a document, you get the lawyers to look over it.
Yes.
And we're not doing that now because it's going out to this amazing community of people. What's the relationship between, you guys and your lawyers? And given that this is new space and new territory, and I'll get you both to answer it. Obviously, your answer first from a business perspective.
Sure.
And then secondly,
I'll give my impression. I mean, Peter has had. I mean, Peter. Just for the full disclosure, Peter is a partner of Gilbert Tobin. They're our lawyers. And we have shown the initial documents through to G&T because this is going to represent a lot of the terms and conditions that will be within the actual documentation that will be coming out. So it's important to have those looked at by your lawyers if you're thinking about a token sale in terms of making sure that everybody's on the same plane, because the regulatory it's a grey morass of mist that we're actually walking through, trying to make sure that we're steering the right path that is not going to put us in jail, I think is the key thing. But there are no rails. There's no rail track for us to go down. We have to actually say, okay, what makes sense? What's the best way of doing it? How does this shape the technology? Because the regulatory risks are the biggest thing from my perspective. In terms of, and it's driving every single decision that we make in terms of the crypto economic model, in terms of the financing, in terms of the tech design. Everything has been driven around mitigating regulatory risk, because if we get this wrong, we're going to jail.
But there's as you just said, there's 1.2 billion has been raised by this, so there's some precedent there.
Oh yeah, but a lot of the ICOs, and I use ICOs for them for a number of those. No. I don't mean it that in that sort of negative way, but some of the ICOs out there are blatantly equities and securities. And I guess when one's looking at the regulatory risk, you look at the idea of saying, are you doing the right thing? That a reasonable person would say, yes, you're doing the right thing. And because I guess the regulatory authorities, and I'd be interested in Peter's view on this, will very much be trying to go for the bad guys, or trying to go for those that have raised a bucket load of cash. And I guess if you're in the middle and you're trying to do the right thing and you're following industry best practice.
What is the right thing? Is it you're pre-selling some currency, you're pre-selling market access? What is it that you're selling?
We're actually selling a token that is intrinsic to the platform that we are creating. We're incentivizing all the creative nodes to actually help us find pirated content, so they get rewarded with cryptocurrency. So it's an intrinsic part of the actual platform itself.
Cool. Okay. Legal perspective.
So going back to the original question, the white paper, the process of review for us is a little bit different to what you might experience in a typical fundraising exercise. There's documentation that you might see when you raise capital for a company, a prospectus, and you go through a bunch of steps if you list and things like that. The white paper review and the other documentation from our perspective in these sorts of exercises is really about trying to find that line between offering a security and making sure you're offering a token. So if you've actually got this economy, the system that you're developing that is in fact the token that Tim's speaking about, that actually enables you to participate in that environment, your white paper should exhibit that. It should actually have the principles of economics in there that actually speak to rewards and fees and things that are economic principles, as opposed to we're going to issue you a product that returns you X% over a period of time and then you might be able to sell it on a speculative basis and things like that. So we're looking at the white paper more so to understand whether or not we're creating that kind of an environment, and understanding whether or not we're triggering some things that could put us in that securities bucket. Other than that, well, we're looking at the white paper also, to help us properly reflect what we need to reflect in the terms and conditions for the ICO. The only contract that actually exists from a perspective of the person who's actually contributing the money is the ICO terms and conditions. And so they have to be aligned, if you like, with the principles of creating such an environment and not look like you're actually issuing securities or financial products. And that's the line that Tim's speaking about. If you actually start, looking at some of the ICOs that are happening out there, they're actually issuing products, and they're taking a risk. And it's, whilst there is this sort of really grey area around what a token actually is and how do you actually do the analysis and understand what a token is and how do I create a token as opposed to a security, it's quite clear around the world in the most significant jurisdictions and the Western jurisdictions what a security is or what a financial product is. And many of the tokens that are actually on offer or have been offered are in fact hitting all those indicators for securities. So it's not that it's grey in that respect. It's grey in the area where you're trying to make sure you've come up with the economics and you've created a token that is that ability to participate in the environment, that pre-bought goods and services kind of concept, the proprietary money. It's really about achieving that, because that's where all the grey is, that's where there's risk. And I think if we talk about what regulators are sort of keeping their eye on, they will be wondering whether or not this environment, the behaviour of this system, all of these folks who are coming out and raising all this money, is more geared towards genuine token sales that are actually to develop a system, a market, a new kind of product, a new kind of service that we can all consume, or are they just blatantly raising money? If they're just blatantly raising money, well, they can be regulated and they can be taken to task with all the normal regulations that we have because you've created a security. If we're all pushing this way, and we're all trying to create these tokens and using this fundraising mechanism, in that sort of context, we're more likely to end up with, regulators watching more and learning more and understanding more instead of coming over the top like a hammer and saying, well, no, you're ripping people off now. 80% of these are bad, 20% are good. We're going to have to do something. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we actually behave badly, regulators will come. If we behave in a way that is, let's create tokens, let's create these environments, we genuinely want to provide these services because they're valuable for protecting IP, for example, then we don't need to regulate that in the same way as securities. There might be other regulations, and there are others that do apply, but it's not a securities regime. And I think that sort of mindset is where we actually start thinking about the steps that we take in the process. Now, if we're talking about a white paper, we review the white paper. We think about what are we disclosing, how transparent are we being, what kind of information are we giving, what does the fee structure sort of look like, what are we telling people they will get, how are tokens valued, what are the economics that are exhibited in the paper so that people understand how they will participate in the environment. I think those sorts of things are actually what we have in our minds when we're going through this review process as lawyers from a regulatory point of view.
And that raises another question, I think. Tim, his business is here, but it may well be that, like some other companies, or there's a trust structure that is overseas and is in a jurisdiction that isn't at all regulated. What's your thoughts on where the money ends up and those jurisdictions? And you mentioned Singapore, but there are other places like Estonia and all those sorts of countries where some of these trusts are located. Yeah.
The choice around jurisdiction at the moment is primarily around finding a place that actually understands what's going on. That's really what it's about. Most recently we've spoken with folks in Estonia who followed the ICO that occurred there. I can't remember which one it's called. Tim, what was that one?
Aragon.
And we actually communicated with some lawyers who were actually engaged with the regulator following that, and they were notified effectively that the regulator wasn't happy to see this sort of roll-on effect and a bunch of ICOs come to Estonia because they didn't feel that it was in fact something they understood and it was potentially a securities offer. Singapore, we're seeing the same kinds of things happen, particularly in relation to ICOs that have recently occurred that actually have dividends sort of associated with the tokens. And so now we're seeing these outcomes where Singapore citizens are being excluded from the offer because you can't offer securities to people in Singapore if you don't have a licence. In the same way you can't offer securities to people in Australia if you don't have a licence. UK, US, most jurisdictions. So it's not about where your company is in terms of the offer and whether or not you should be there from a regulatory point of view, because it's where you actually sell the securities to if you're actually offering securities. If you're offering tokens, it's about, you can pretty much go global, except for some jurisdictions who have just gone no. In Russia, for example, they've just gone no. We don't want to go there. But otherwise, you will have those securities law questions coming up. Whatever jurisdiction you try and tackle, if you are actually creating security. So you'll be subject to regulation from the corporate point of view if you reside in Singapore. If you're in Australia, you're subject to Australian law. Singapore is subject to Singapore law. But where you offer the product will also determine what regulation you have to try and understand. And if you offer a security, that understanding or getting a grasp on what that actually is becomes far greater and far more costly.
Cool. I can see a few people already with their hands being...
Can I just add one thing, just one little thing, and I'll keep it really quick, all right? I mean, Peter did mention Estonia. We were looking at Estonia quite healthily. But we then started talking to some of the film industry contacts that we were talking about, and immediately there was a red flag as soon as you said Estonia, because it's linked into the URS or former URS, and that's where piracy happens in a major way. And so that's where Singapore drove us from a commercial point of view.
Never had a meeting with any Russian lawyer.
If I was in France, would I say oui, oui? Would that be inappropriate? No, maybe. Sorry. Oh, no, that's okay. It's a bad joke. It's a bad joke.
Look, gentleman down the front here, first question, but just give us your name and organisation if you are going to ask a question, please. Let's start here.
My name's Peter Dobrevich, Polymath Investors. I don't understand tokens at all, and maybe I could understand it better by putting a hypothetical situation to both of you. Let's say Tim issues tokens, and I buy 100% of the tokens. I've got two questions. One, can he issue more tokens? And if he can't, what legal rights do I have as 100% owner of 100% of all the tokens? Can I take over the whole ecosystem? What can I do?
I'll talk about it from a commercial point of view. Then, yeah. I mean, certainly, it's an issue that we've been looking at in a lot of depth because, I mean, there's a Forbes article that came out last week that looked at 15 major hedge funds that are getting into the cryptocurrency space, and it's very much the needs of the hedge funds and those types of guys coming into the space who are driven by these exceptional returns that have been seen in certain cryptocurrencies are very different as compared to the clients that we're trying to talk to. So number one, from our side, commercially, we would never just have a high exposure to one particular party for exactly the reason that you're talking about in terms of the undue influence they could have on the actual market. I mean, within the protocol, we're actually launching 300 million tokens on day one. That's all that will ever be issued. So there are no more that can actually be issued. That's definitively written into the protocol, and there are certain elements within that will be more detailed in the actual the white paper and that type of area that will itemize how different elements are structured. But certainly, from a commercial point of view, we'd never be exposed to one entity.
Okay, I understand the question. You're not going to issue any more tokens. Let's say I go and buy every token from other people.
The environment becomes useless. There's no spread. There's no way for people to participate.
Let's say I do. What do I get any value?
No, you don't have an ownership interest. That's the key difference between a token and a security. So a security is an ownership interest, something that entitles you to vote and do these things. You actually exhibit a right in relation to ownership of a corporation or a fund or an interest like you can put your hands on. A token is like money. If you think about it as a digital currency, money, you can go and do what you want with that. You haven't relinquished your control over the decision making for your token in the same way that you can control your own money. You haven't actually got an ownership right in relation to anything, but what can you do with your token and your money? You can go into an environment and you can go, well, I want to pay for that service. I want to get my IP stamped. I want to actually engage with Tim's marketplace so that I'm protected and I can find out who is pirating my material, and I pay for that in that environment using these tokens. So you're not buying ownership interest, and that's critical because ownership interests, again, are securities. So it's not about buying tokens so that you can actually leverage the value that's created intrinsically in the marketplace, because if it doesn't have value, it's useless anyway, but you're not buying the token for that purpose. So it's not a play, like an investment play in that sense. You can speculate, because if the environment has intrinsic value and it is really worth something and people perceive this, and there's scarcity with the tokens, only 300 million exist, people will want them. And if there's scarcity in the same way there's scarcity in money supply, the price of the money will go up, interest rates.
So there's no value in owning 100% of the tokens?
No, you render the environment useless. You're the only participant. You can't buy and sell from yourself. You can't help the market participate by yourself. You can't do anything. If you want an equity play, you need to get involved with the manager in the traditional way, in terms of shares or securities and fund interest. That's a primary sort of distinction. And that's what we're looking at when we're thinking about tokens and securities. If we don't have those features, we possibly have securities, so we've got to get to that point.
Okay, we've got three questions here. Gentleman with a grey jacket, you're number 3. Please name and organisation.
Benworth Consulting and Services. My first question is how the value of a token is determined. Does it stay same as start and at the end of sale? And the other thing is there any sites which gives a list of bad and good ones?
Yeah, I mean,
Bad guys, sorry.
Is it a
I'll-
finder.com.au?
I'll hit the last question first because that's an easy question. No, but if, sorry, the question was, are there any sites that highlight good and bad sites, good and bad ICOs? And then the original question.
Like, is there a site that gives exchange rates?
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay. In terms of sites, there are things like smithandcrown.com is a very good one. That's becoming almost the Standard & Poor's and Moody's of the ICO space in general. And I hate using the word ICO, but you know what I mean, because that's how they define it. So that's a pretty good one. You can pay for some private reports on various token sales. In terms of the pricing, the market ultimately will determine the price. I mean, once things go to onto the cryptocurrency exchanges, if anybody's been involved in Ethereum or involved in any other form of cryptocurrency, you'll see prices go up and down all over the place, and they're often stimulated by the engagement the platform has with their customers. So, for example, I can't say who we're talking to at the moment, but there's a dedicated peer-to-peer distribution technology that we're about to partner with that has got agreement with one of the major film studios. And getting that combined automatically, if it was in the open market, that would tend to push the price up. So, and often when you see a cryptocurrency partners with Microsoft or with IBM, the price tends to spike. And it's all those things. The idea is that there's likely to be more people using the platform, therefore more tokens will be used. Therefore, the implication is that there'll be more value to the platform.
Cool. Now, the token can't have a cross usage, like your token can't be used for another site.
Well, I mean, we're actually talking, and again, I won't say which one, but we're talking with another ICO that happened last year that's got some technology that we could really work with. So we're talking about accepting some of their cryptocurrency tokens as part of our token sale. Because more often than not, you accept Bitcoin and Ethereum; those are the standard ones. But this particular one adds value to what we're doing. So we're still undergoing negotiations there. So other platforms do use other people's currencies or other sites' currencies.
Could you please shout out your question so people at the back can hear?
Yeah. Greg Einfeld from Plenty. When you issue your 300 million tokens, where does the money go?
In terms of, well, there will be smart contracts linked into the issuance of those tokens. So it'll be, and that smart contract will be audited by an external party. We've got escrow agents that are holding the actual cash for us. So that, and we're looking at putting various milestones in place so that the funds can only be drawn down against certain milestones.
And what would those milestones be, and what would the money be spent on? Or does it always sit in a trust account like a gold standard backing the value of the...
Well, it's because most of the payment for token sales are usually in Ethereum or in Bitcoin. So they will be held in very secure wallets and multi-sig wallets and that type of thing. Unfortunately, they represent a big honeypot for hackers to go after. That's the reality. So we've got deep security experts on board that are helping us on making sure that we've got everything secured. So they will be held in such an environment that we can't access all the funds until we've hit certain key milestones. And then the idea is that that the escrow agent will release those funds at appropriate time.
Want to answer the question of where the money goes?
Yeah, I was just going to add the money that's used for the development of the platform doesn't back the value of the token. The token derives its value from the environment, the system that's created. So it's used to build the system, and the value
but
is...
I think the gentleman's question was, until it's all used, where does it sit?
Yeah, it's held in escrow,
And
it's
form does
released.
it sit in?
Currency.
That was the question.
It'll generally, subject to the professional view
What do they pay you in? Yeah.
of where the market is actually going to be heading. We've got to, we're talking to various hedging-based structures. So the majority will probably be kept in the cryptocurrency, working on the basis of where we see and project the future value of those currencies to go. But some needs to be transferred into cash to pay salaries. I mean, unless Peter's going to accept Ethereum for his exorbitant fees. No, for his
Good question. Good question.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that could be interesting.
That's. I'm just staying silent on it.
Yeah.
The more users you have, the better. So,
No, absolutely.
yeah, excellent.
Yeah, hi, Nicholas Levy, InnoData Consulting. It's probably more around the security or the need to define the token term. So what's the issue if it is a dividend, or if you call it some sort of another term? And I mean, what's the issue if like as far as if they're being equities, like if you were to say have an AFSL or the relevant one in Singapore, and your token is backed by a coupon that distributes that. I mean, is it?
There's nothing wrong with creating digital securities, provided you have a license to do it in the jurisdiction you offer from, and you issue disclosure documentation in the jurisdiction you're offering in, and you comply with the laws of every jurisdiction that you offer the security into. So if you offer from Singapore and you're offering a security, you've got to meet all of the requirements for a Singapore securities offer. And if you wanted to extend to the States, you'd have to meet all of the requirements in the States to offer securities in the States. If you wanted to extend that token offer into Australia, you'd have to comply with all of our laws as well. That's in the same way that applies today.
When you're saying security, are you saying a like for like as an ICO or a listed entity? Like as a private company that doesn't have
A share in a company doesn't matter.
As long as you're compliant with those jurisdictions, does it matter that the token's acting as a proxy for part of that?
It's not grey. It's not really about renaming it or anything like that. If you look at the economics of the product that you create, if it's a share in a company, a debenture, some other kind of note, a derivative, an interest in a fund, a partnership interest, any of those things is a regulated product. And it doesn't matter what you call it, what you call the money that's flowing from it, if it has that kind of character, those obligations will be triggered in any one of those jurisdictions that you offer it in, or you have to at least consider them to see if you've got to do something to alleviate the requirements that you have to meet. That's the problem with creating a security and trying to issue it on a global level.
There was I'll just add, there's one you can perhaps refer to. There was one, Blockchain Capital did one out of Singapore about 3 months ago, I think it was. And that was specifically targeted towards wholesale investors. And that was a regulated scheme that they put together. If you look up Blockchain Capital, you'll see there is a white paper that for accredited investors can see that. But that was a dedicated regulated structure that they put in place.
Yeah, hi, I'm Josh from Plenty as well. Tim, I just want to say it sounds like an interesting project as someone who steals a lot of content now and then. I would be happy to pay for it.
I can't possibly. Oh, if you're going to pay for it, no. If you're going to pay for it, that's great.
If I could.
No, absolutely. That's the driver that we're trying to hit.
So I was just wondering, who do you issue those 300 million tokens to? Because given you said that the value in it is people using it, if you were to sell all 300 million to a speculator or someone who's just buying it in the hope that it goes up, they'll never actually use it.
Absolutely.
So who do you actually issue?
Basically, we've built into that 300 million model. 100 million are actually dedicated towards incentivizing the nodes that are part of the actual, to incentivize the structure. Because we've recognized that electricity prices are different across the world. And as in Bitcoin mining, for example, I mean, that's an economics that probably a lot of you understand, that most of it's in China. Now, we don't want to have all our eggs in one basket in China searching for pirated content, because that wouldn't work. So we've had to build in an incentivization structure to enable other parties that are in different geographies that we might have to actually give them more incentives to actually help us with the pirated search. So that's a dedicated part of what we're actually launching. Equally, what we're doing, I mean, there are part of the tokens will be for Treasury and reserves to look at the issue of if somebody's trying to completely stitch up the price, we can actually sort of perhaps get involved in some sort of alleviation of that price action. But also there'll be things like the developers and the founders and that type of thing who are putting a lot of time and effort in will be rewarded, including the advisors. But everybody's being held on an escrow structure where 80% of all the coins that they're actually being allocated will be held. Certainly the founders, developers, and any team members will be held over 3 years, and advisors will be held for 12 months, but they've got access to 20%. And then any portion that is not sold, because we're going for a core raise of $7.5 million USD. We've put a hard cap, which you may have seen a lot of the ICOs have been uncapped, and there have been stupid monies raised, 150, 250 million. It's insane, right? So we're putting in a hard cap of 20 million, so that it's a fixed amount gets sold, and any portion over the top will actually go into an enterprise growth fund, so that if there's technology that actually really helps us improve the platform, then we'll look towards saying, let's actually look towards acquiring this technology with the idea we'll give 30 days notice to all the Ventana token holders. Well, I mean,
So
sorry, yeah.
So the question for the people in the back is, why not use VCs to raise the money? Why go down the ICO road?
Okay, when we first started looking at this, we were looking at the idea of creating this decentralized anti-piracy structure, and we were thinking that's probably going to be 3 to 5 years' time in the future, right? Where the film industry is as good to technology as the Amish are. You know, they're not the earliest adopters of tech. They are for production, but when it comes to anything else, they tend to be very, very cautious. So as a result, we're working on the basis, because we're trying to hit social media theft as well, which is where people download YouTube videos, put it up on the Facebook as if it's their own.
Background in film. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wrote and directed the award-winning feature film that got pirated, so they shouldn't have pissed me off, really. I've lost my train of thought now. Yeah. So the idea is we're looking at this in maybe 3-5 years that the film studios would actually come on board and actually fund it. Yeah, like that sort of VC model. But what we're doing is creating the heart and soul as an open source structure. The majority of it will be open source, so others can develop on top of it. Right? So if somebody wants to look for music, or they want to look for legal precedents or fashion designs, bang, they can, right? And we're building a commercial wrap around that. So we've built the heart and soul with the idea of it being open source, that we get that funded via a token sale structure. So what it means is, as an entrepreneur, and for other parties involved in the core commercial aspects of what we're doing, it means that we don't need VC funding.
So
Which,
days of VCs?
Well, so from our point of view, and I'm sure a lot of how many tech startups are in the room right now? How many of you would love to give the one finger to the VCs? No, I don't mean that. No, that's grossly rude and disrespectful. I apologise. But it is, on a serious level, it's going to seriously disrupt, especially at the Series A level. I see it.
Yeah. Why would I want to expand the use of your platform into other industries or application areas if Hyperledger Fabric gives me that ability anyway?
Hyperledger can do certain elements, but I think the key thing is that we're building the community. That's where the strength of this will come, because there's not only an emotional consideration, there's a financial consideration for creative people, right? There's also a cultural consideration, because if we don't actually remove film and video piracy, what's going to happen is we're just going to get mass-produced crap, if I can just use that word, that includes piracy as an occupational hazard. And we're going to lose those independent voices, the controversial voices, the cultural voices. And it just means we're just going to become culturally vapid, and that's not what we want.
I think can I just add to that?
Yeah.
I think from a VC point of view too, what do you really want to invest in? Do you want to invest in that community, or do you want to invest in some sort of accretion in value in an entity that created the community or had something to do with its creation? So I think when you're looking at these environments, you're actually, it's an asset class perhaps that is different, not completely displacing VC, because you've got the builders still, the folks who actually provide the solutions and the technology and the thoughts, and there might be an entity there that actually does all of this work. But the community itself, the asset class or the asset that kind of comes out of that community is the token. And if you want to speculate in currency, you can speculate in tokens. So I think it's you've got to think about it a little bit differently from a VC point of view.
Marco Manera from Lakiba. And Tim, going back to the community, you mentioned before, when you release the white paper, you expect to get a lot of feedback from the community, likely. I think at that time, probably it's too late to do anything about the white paper if you get suggestions about changes or things you want to modify, because I expect it's set in stone. So how do you engage with the community before the white paper is released?
We've already had the white paper peer reviewed. So
you already issued like a draft one?
Yeah, we have, to people that we know and people whose opinion we truly value, who are deep experts, alongside Sam, who's a deep expert. So it's very much, I can give my comments and the rest of the team can give their comments, but in terms of deep tech, we need to get those guys engaged. And we've engaged a few globally to actually give us the initial feedback. So when we actually launch the white paper, there will be feedback, and we welcome feedback, because if there are areas that can improve it, hey, we're really happy on that side, because it's all about solving this problem.
That's not community. I mean, has anyone ever released a draft white paper for comments before releasing the final one?
I think a lot of people do exactly what we've done, is release it to specific members of the community.
Not the whole community, but specific.
Yeah, I think because you don't want to get outside of, you want the white paper to be the best it can be when it goes into the public eye, or the community's eye, probably. And if you put it out too early, you could be shooting yourself in the foot, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you. Question, your name and organisation.
Have you guys thought about, this is another new concept, after the ICO, an IBO, an initial bounty offering, which a lot of these guys are now going. So instead of actually changing coins, you can, in the ecosystem, blockchain ecosystem, you can change skills and services.
We've got a security bounty. I mean, we've got 5% of the tokens allocated for security, so that if there are people that find security flaws, we want to know about those. Not specifically in terms of other services, but I mean, it's an interesting sort of concept to explore. Haven't explored it per se right now. I mean, this thing is complex enough as it is right now, but I think it's an interesting idea. No, I'm interested in ultimately exploring it if it makes sense for the platform.
Just to, I guess, before we wrap up, we've probably got time for a couple more questions. How do people get in touch with you if they want to participate?
I mean, really, we've got if you go to, there's a website address there, it's tokensale.veredictum.io if it's something that's of interest. I mean, the formalised white paper comes out next Monday. We've got 3 initial documents there for you to actually view, and we're taking expressions of interest in the pre-sales, literally from yesterday.
Cool. Now.
Yeah, Warren Stokes, Sequoia Financial Group. There was an ICO launched last week, which I'm sure you know about, where $7 million was hacked.
Yep.
How different is that to what you're doing? And I guess from a public perception, what safeguards have you got in place that will be different to that?
It's absolutely a totally valid question. Security is absolutely right up there in terms of key priorities. We've engaged, we've got security experts that are, that we're just finalising some of the fine-tuning on things tomorrow. But these are guys that are well known within the community for security. They're actually ex-hackers, which actually gives us a great deal of confidence. They're now white hat hackers, is the best way of saying it.
They're on the payroll.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's a very valid point, because the way this was actually, the $7 million went out of the token sale was actually they hacked into the website and changed the address to send stuff to. So that was a core flaw in the underlying security. So we're fearfully conscious of all aspects of security.
Okay.
Okay. So the question was about network effects to grow a community. I mean, it's vital. I mean, we're very much committed towards getting the creative community on board. And there's a video that will be, we've got a cheeky 24-second advert that's going to be coming out. Adriana, can you remind me when it's going to come out? Yeah, but we believe this weekend that is trying to galvanise the creative community together, because if you talk to anybody in the creative industry, and we've got interviews in our website, we've been putting together a lot of inside information relating to how we're thinking about things called token sales, looking at exposing what we're doing with the whole token sale, so that you can understand what's going on. We've now got two videos, one of Matthew Holmes, who directed a film called The Legend of Ben Hall, that comes out in the US on the 1st of August. 50% of all his downloads are pirated. All right? He's actually had people come through to him from India saying, can you please give us the original text for the last 4 slides on the movie, so that we can translate it. And this was in India, and he said, well, it's not available in India. You've got a pirated version. Oh yeah, I know, but can you just send us? And you think this is talking directly to the filmmaker, And you've got the situation where he is actually saying, I cannot make another movie. If I don't get a return on the investment that the guys who have backed me have actually have put into this movie, I can't make another movie. right? And so it's absolutely, the emotional narrative is absolutely there for anybody in the creative industry. Is there anybody in the creative industry here? I saw one person. Oh, there's a lone hand going up there. Okay, all right.
Australia is not the sort of global HQ of filmmakers.
You would be surprised. There are some great filmmakers around. They're probably just too shy because they're in front of you, Glen. You see, that's what it is. Yeah, but the network effect is absolutely right, and that's what we're trying to do.
Did you want to have a comment on the network effect?
No, I wouldn't really. The only thing I'd add, I suppose, is going back to the comments I was making earlier. I mean, if you're not creating something that Tim's describing that people can see the value in, whether it's using network effect or just from the economic structure of it, well then I think you've got a critical problem.
Would you please join me in thanking Tim and Peter for their time?